What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show, and in this video I want to share with you guys some prison stories. But before I even get into that, I want to take a moment and talk about all of the other things that we've been sharing with you as of late. I also want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of After Prison Show and partaking on everyone who's a part of After Prison Show's journey after prison. You know, to be honest with you, it's been pretty chaotic lately. We've got a lot of things going on. After Prison Show is the most important thing outside of my own personal life with my wife. But not only is it After Prison Show, it's now the After Prison Show cleaning company, which has been taking on more work, dealing with certain headaches in relation to getting paid. We've also got some huge jobs coming up that I'm having trouble trying to figure out how to even bid those jobs. And I'm scared to death thinking, what if we fail? And all of that turns into an absolute fiasco and disaster. We've got Hollywood calling and a lot of positive things that could potentially be taking place in relation to that. My wife and I are also in the process of trying to purchase our first home. I've shown you guys that, and I really appreciate all of the support that you guys have shown in relation to not only that, but everything else. And with everything that I've already mentioned here, and as if that's not enough, I'm writing a book. The After Prison Show, My Craziest Illustrated Prison Stories / Joe Writes His Wrongs. And I'm 41 pages into this book already. Trying to find time to actually be able to write this book has not exactly been easy, but it is my hope that within about the next 3 months, this thing is ready for production. I'm gonna self-publish this, and you guys will get a chance to check this out if you want to do so. Included in this book is, just as I said, my craziest illustrated prison stories. But it's actually become so much more than that. You know, in relation to a book, there's been so many things that I've thought of. Do we do an After Prison Show cookbook? We're definitely doing that. Do we do an After Prison Show coloring book? Thought about that. Maybe you buy the book and you get some colored pencils that come along with it. But this is what I'm working on right now, my craziest illustrated prison stories. And not only is this going to feature the cartoons that I drew while locked up, but more importantly, so many stories. My entire 7 years crammed into about 250 pages. And y'all know Joe like to talk. I'm super long-winded, so trying to fit all of that into 250 pages, I'm not exactly sure how I'm gonna make that possible. I'm 41 pages into this book, and I'm still sitting in the jail. I haven't even gotten to prison yet. But this book that I'm writing is very important to the prison stories that I'm gonna be sharing with you guys in this video. And before I get to those, one final thing that I wanna mention is, you know, it is not exactly as easy as I once thought it could be attempting to write a book. You know, while locked up, a lot of guys will do that. They'll write short stories. Dave fancies himself as a writer as well. Dave's gonna be having some books come out. But when you're serving time, you're certainly gonna meet people who are writing books, or possibly who have already written and gotten books published. A lot of guys while locked up will write what is referred to as hood novels. Meaning you've got your kingpins, your kilos, and all the spicy sex scenes you can muster into a 250-page book. And there ain't nothing like having a guy come up to you while you're locked up talking about, hey man, will you read this chapter of my book? And you're reading this thing trying to cross your legs at the same time because that joint is just so steamy. How did you get so descriptive with this? I mean, this joint better than videos on the internet right here. Boy, you ain't got nothing but time on your hands. Hey, back shower, who got neck? Can I borrow this for a couple of minutes? And you know, that's kind of weird at the same time. You're reading something that is got you having to cross your legs. And you know that it's written by a dude I can't ever get, that doesn't work for me. But moving on and getting to what I want to share with you guys in this video, there's a section in this book where I served 60 days in isolation. And while down there in isolation, I've told you guys the prison story about this. The book is going to feature a lot more nitty-gritty details and is really going to be the uncensored version of a lot of the stories I've already shared with you guys, and also stories that I've never been able to share with you guys because YouTube, Disney Channel Flow, I'm gonna need you guys to read between the lines on that one. But again, there is a section where I talk about that 60 days that I served in isolation. I ate toothpaste to kill the hunger pains. I was locked up with a bunch of crazy prisoners who were playing with their own fecal matter, possibly making chess pieces out of those, or writing their names on the walls of their cells while down there in the hole. But while I was down there, you know, I would go through this very dark period of time where I had to make a decision whether I still wanted to continue on and attempt to not only get through the time, and if I was gonna do that, then I was gonna attempt like all hell to try to have a better life for myself, or if I was gonna go ahead and just hit the delete button and, you know, take what I refer to as the easy way out. But it was while I was down there in isolation thinking these crazy thoughts, being depressed, being just crazy. You know, one thing that would most certainly add to all of that was the thought and the realization that in this same exact isolation cell block, there was a good friend of mine from way back in the day, a guy that I knew from my life in the streets named Little Ronnie, who had actually taken his life in this same exact cell block. And there's a reason why I'm bringing up Little Ronnie. This is a guy that I may have mentioned in passing in a prison story related to what I'm telling you guys about right now, but I'm gonna really introduce you guys to this individual via this picture right here. Folks, this is Little Ronnie. This is a super old picture. This is probably taken before we even had camera phones, or maybe with the very first camera phone that there ever was. You can tell by the quality of this picture. And this is the guy that I was talking about in that particular story who did, in fact, take his own life. And pictured with this guy is another individual who I knew while locked up, a guy by the name of Donnie. And I'm going to be introducing you to this Donnie guy as well in this video. You know, it's a very crazy thing to be locked up, to be depressed, to go through a dark period of time, to also experience all of that in isolation, where you're surrounded by chaos, horrible guards who are treating you terrible, they're not feeding you all that much. That is, without question, the worst type of time anyone could ever serve. Then go ahead and throw in the additional stuff that I was dealing with, knowing that I had a good friend from back in the day who lost their life, took their life in this same exact cell block. And in Little Ronnie's case, allegedly it was different. This was a guy who was locked up facing, I think, like about 5 years. But he was dealing with a lot of issues in relation to his wife. This guy was married, and he was married at a young age. And the crazy thing to mention about that is that this guy, one thing that I will never forget about this dude was just how many girls were in love with him. And you know, Little Ronnie was the type of guy that you wanted to be cool with this guy. This was the top of the chain when it came to the cool kids. Little Ronnie was definitely that. And I mean, girls flocked to this dude. So to be in his presence and to be friends with him meant that you were going to be in the company of some chicks as well. Probably quite a few chicks. But when Little Ronnie got locked up, the thought of doing 5 years and the thought of what his wife would be doing while he was locked up got the best of him. And he would then take his life. He would hang himself from a vent in his cell, and he would hang there for minutes. I don't know how long, but I know that, you know, when the guards finally saw him, they took him down, they rushed him to the hospital, and he was still alive. However, he was brain dead. He would remain on life support for something like 2 weeks. I can't remember exactly how much time. And then they would pull the plug on him. And that was a really sad and crazy thing, thinking back to that time. You might think to yourself, you know, Ronnie was married, but he had all of these girls. And don't get me wrong, he definitely dealt with those girls. But his wife was no saint either. They were married far too young. And that was a commitment that I don't think either one of them was ready for. They also had a pretty crazy relationship. I'm not going to say it's the craziest relationship that I had ever known anybody to be in, but it's most certainly the second craziest. First craziest is way worse. To be in this cell block where you know that a friend of yours did what they did here, and to also know that you're facing way more time. My lawyer told me I was facing a max of 50 years if convicted on everything. If they wanted to give me the max on everything, I would get convicted of everything, but I would only get 7.5 years because my guidelines called for a maximum of 5.5 years, but because I had mandatory minimum time, meaning that I was a convicted felon, caught in possession of a weapon while also caught in possession of drugs for sale, that my mandatory minimum time was now higher than what the high end of my original sentencing guidelines would have been. I know that's confusing, but with the fact that my mandatory minimum time was 7 years, the high end of my guidelines was 5.5, the prosecution recommended that I just serve the 7.5 because that was already 2 years higher than what my original high guidelines would have called for. But I didn't have my time yet when I was sitting in this situation. I was still dealing with this open case, not knowing how much time I would end up with. But even with everything that I was dealing with in this chaotic, depressing situation, I would make the decision that I wasn't going to give up. And if I somehow miraculously ended up with less than 15 years, well, maybe I would still have another chance at life. That would mean I would still have another chance at life. And maybe this time I could get it right. And it's been over 3 years since I've been released now, and I like to believe that I've done pretty good in that regard. But the reason that I introduce all of you to Ronnie is because I want to introduce all of you to Donnie. Kind of crazy that their names rhyme the way that they do. But I'll never forget when I first met Donnie. I was like 18 years old. I was sitting in the old side of Chesapeake City Jail down in what is referred to as the dungeon. And when I first met this dude, he was a small little guy from an area that I used to frequent, and he knew Ronnie. So that was something that we had in common. And I'm not sure if he's actually related to Ronnie or if they were just really good friends, maybe they're cousins. I'm not exactly sure. But the fact that we both knew this guy and we knew some other people as well, we became cool. And one way that we would pass the time, and this is something that any prisoner is going to do, entering into bid mode, knowing that you're serving time, however much time that it is, and knowing that you got to do things in an effort to keep your mind off of that time, is to tell war stories. And me and Donnie would go back and forth almost like a rap battle, telling stories of our heydays, which we were probably definitely still in the midst of, at 18 years old. I would tell Donnie crazy stories of things that I was doing. Hey man, when I was 17 years old, check this out. When I was 17 years old, a week before I was about to get my driver's license, me, my little brother, and a friend of ours, we took my father's 1997 Blazer SUV. We pushed it out of the driveway. We went and paintballed a whole bunch of signs and houses up, and then we got in a high-speed chase. A high-speed chase in the rain. I was going 100 miles an hour getting chased by a Jeep Cherokee that could only go 85 miles an hour. I spun out. This guy pulled right up in front of me. I didn't know what he was gonna do. I didn't know if he was getting out of the car or not, but then all of a sudden he left. And I had to think real quick, like, what just happened? This man just got our license plates. Immediately we floored it, hauling ass back to my father's house, throwing the paintball guns out of the vehicle like they was real guns. Pushed the vehicle back up into the driveway, and no sooner than we crept back inside the window so we didn't set the alarm off on the house, and I laid down in the bed, I saw the police spotlights all over the house. I'm quite sure that was one of the war stories that I told Donnie. And I'll never forget one of the war stories that he told me, involving not only him, but also little Ronnie. You see, they did the same type of stuff that I was doing at the time. All the wrong things. Going out, breaking into cars, stealing things, horrible things. Things that I look back on now, and I'm disgusted at myself that I did those things. But you know what? I'm man enough to admit that I did. But Donnie told me a story about this one night involving him and little Ronnie, and how little Ronnie was just always the guy who would attempt to do anything. I call this guy a master thief, but the truth of the matter is, he would just attempt certain crazy things that I don't think anybody else would ever attempt to do. And I'm not sure if this story is true or not. I've got no way to verify this, but the story is just crazy enough as it is. Taking place this one night when Donnie and Ronnie were creeping through somebody's backyard. It was a waterfront property. They had a dock, and tied up to this dock was a houseboat. A houseboat. That's a pretty big boat. And how the two of these guys crept down the dock, got onto this houseboat, and attempted to steal this thing. Where were they going to take this? I mean, think about this. It's so crazy if this is true. What are you going to do with a houseboat? I don't even know if you can get that thing out of the water. What are you going to do? You going to ride that thing down the river and then sell it? Hey, you trying to buy a houseboat? You trying $150? You ain't got $150 for a houseboat. And if I can remember correctly, these guys had no experience with boats at all. So it would be miraculous that they were even able to get this thing started. And not only were they able to get the boat started, but they were also able to put this thing in gear. All it is a lever. Engage. You're going to be going forward. But as soon as they got the boat started up and went to put the boat into gear to go forward, all of the lights on the boat came on. And it was then, as they were pulling away from the dock, that they forgot to take the lines off of, so the boat is just that they heard a commotion coming from somewhere inside of the boat, and then realized that there were people who were asleep on this thing. So picture this. A boat that's tied up to the docks, a big boat. You've started this thing up in an attempt to steal it. All of the lights have come on. You've put it in gear. And this thing is steadily trying to pull away from the dock. It's probably pretty loud. Boards are probably creaking and snapping. And all of a sudden you hear people screaming, "Hey, what the heck? Hey, what's going on? Hey, where are we going? Hey, who's on?" In the midst of all of this chaos, Donnie tells me that they don't even take the boat out of gear. They don't even cut it off. They jump off of the boat onto the dock while the boat is still trying to pull away. People are screaming. And they're running down this dock. I don't know how long it is, but as I'm hearing this story, I'm just picturing like any scene in a movie where you've got the two characters who are running away from the explosion, jumping, diving as the explosion is going off behind them. I mean, this was pretty entertaining. I got to admit, he definitely one-upped me with this story. I thought my little story about paintballing some houses was something. Oh, this took the cake. They were running down the dock, dove into the water, swam across this little inlet to the other side, got out of the water, soaking wet, ran, and got away. They tried to steal a houseboat. I didn't have a war story that was going to be able to compete with that. I don't remember what would end up happening after this, whether I would go home before Donnie or Donnie would go home before me or one of us would get moved. I can't remember. But all I can remember is that story from that time. And that would be the last time that I would ever see Donnie until the 7 years that I just served. In fact, the very end of those 7 years, during the last 2 years of those 7 years, a time in my life that I've told plenty of prison stories about, the last 2 years at this crazy prison called Indian Creek. And it would be during this time at this particular prison where I would run into Donnie again. Now, mind you, when I first met him, I was 18 years old. Fast forward to this point in my life, I'm like 30 or 32, and Donnie is about the same age as me. And I'll never forget when I first ran into this guy again. By this point, I'm a mural painter. So I'm able to go in any building that I want. I'm painting stupid little pictures all over the walls. Stay positive, do good, work the program. It works. It works. You better work this program that they trying to program you with like you a robot, like you a firmware upgrade up inside of this prison. I was in building 3. Donnie was in building 5. That's across the yard, meaning that he's on one side of the prison and I'm on the other side. He's not able to go from his side of the yard to my side of the yard, but I'm able to go anywhere that I want because of this super sweet prison job that I've got. And not only am I able to go anywhere that I want, I'm also able to take anybody I want with me. So I'm taking Kenny, Sunshine, I'm taking Miko, I'm taking any list of people who wanted to just come and be my helper for the day. And what that helper actually did was, because where I painted these pictures at was kind of high above the bunks inside of the housing units, I would need scaffolding. And they had this little scaffolding on wheels that my helper would help me with. We'd get it positioned and their job was just to hold it. But that job holding that scaffolding that didn't pay any money at all was priceless in comparison to the alternative, which was being stuck inside of the building. Having to pull up for group in your little plastic chair, pull up before you get rolled up. It's TCing time, it's therapeutic community time. We're about to talk about this counselor's addiction to cake. I know about addiction. I once was an addict too. I feel your pain. Do you know how hard it was for me to go inside of the grocery store and walk past the bakery, past it, without picking up a cake? I may not have been addicted to drugs, but I had an addiction for the sweets, for the sweet stuff. We're talking batter and icing, baked cakes. Hey, can you just go ahead and take me to the hole, because this is gonna make me worse. You were addicted to what? Yeah, being a helper that didn't pay any money, it sure paid a lot better than having to sit through some of them groups and listen to that bullshit. And you know, during this time, I didn't even know Donnie was locked up. I wasn't even thinking about Donnie. It wasn't until I walked into building 5 with the scaffolding and my helper, possibly Kenny, my bunkie, and we go to do this painting. And it was just coincidental that where we were doing this painting, in between these 2 bunks, well, right there on the bottom bunk was Donnie. And we go into the building, we're pulling our scaffolding in there. Everybody in building 5 is pulled up to the front talking about a counselor's addiction to cake or whatever the group is about. Maybe they're doing a TPAP. If you don't remember what a TPAP is, go watch that video about the craziest prison punishments I just did recently. You'd be surprised. Everybody's up front doing the group, doing the program. We take the scaffolding, slide it between the bunks, but this guy, he's just laying on his bunk, watching TV. It was Donnie. I didn't even recognize him at first. He looked so much different from when I would have, I had completely forgot about him. To say that I would recognize him, I wouldn't. And I want to share this picture with you guys right now because there's a very ironic thing about Donnie. And this is actually kind of really weird. But looking at this picture that I'm getting ready to share with you, tell me this guy doesn't look a lot like Dave. That's Donnie. That's a more recent picture of him with his 2 children. I see this guy who's bucking on group. I'm already impressed. You blew me away at 18 years old with this story about this houseboat. But because of your willingness to just go so hard, I ain't group. Nah, ain't no group. More Povich on. Hey man, we're getting ready to do this painting. I don't want to be in your way. I always had to be very respectful. There were people who would just cuss me out. Man, why you gotta come paint this dumbass picture? Right? Well, I don't want to look at this. Hey, I'm just doing my job, stick man. I'm just doing what the people tell me to do. You need to pull up though. They got group time going on up front. Go, get your chair up front. So as soon as we get the scaffolding in there, hey man, I apologize. What? Hey, don't I know you? Donnie. in prison with me 15 years later. Pretty ironic. So now this made this job just that much better. Here's a guy that I haven't seen since I was 18. Imagine the war stories we could tell each other now. Now we pull the scaffolding in, and just so we don't got to sit on somebody's bunk, we're just sitting on the scaffolding, kicking the bobo. Well, during this time, we would tell all sorts of war stories. We would catch up. I would tell Donnie about my prison hustle. This mural painting gig, this is just a cover. This is just a cover company. This is just a front for what I'm really doing. I got these little pictures they sending me in the mail. I got the prison porn operation on Smash. Donnie was super impressed by this. He was like, damn, Joe, you're doing super good. He was like, well, let me share something with you that I'm doing. And his hustle was making candy. We've talked about this in the past, all the different types of hustles that prisoners can have. Candy is a very generic hustle. You're not gonna make a lot of money doing this unless you were somebody like Donnie, who had this super exclusive recipe that I wish I could remember. And I'm gonna try like hell to be able to remember this, because this was some damn good candy. Now, in the past, we've made prison peanut brittle, and that's the best that I could try to compare this to. But this was more like some kind of prison peanut brittle Laffy Taffy, or maybe like a caramel chew, or something like that. But Donnie pulls out this candy. He's like, yeah, man, this is what I'm making right here. And this candy had an appearance that already was crazy. And as I taste this candy for the very first time, I mean, it is so good. I mean, this tastes like some candy you buy out of the store, something even better than that, which a lot of prison candy tastes a lot better than store-bought candy because it's nothing but sugar mixing every type of candy together. But as I'm eating this caramel chew type of whatever the heck this was, he then tells me what the name of this is, and I almost spit out the candy. Man, this is the best. How do you make that? I can't tell you that, Joe. I can't give up the game. I can't give you my recipe. This is exclusive. I'm the only one at this prison who knows how to make cat turds. Cat what? Cat turds. That's actually, Donnie, that's actually a really clever name. Cat turds. Because that's exactly what these things look like. The ingredients were pretty basic. I remember it was the caramels, the little square caramels that you can get, a little bit of peanut butter, very little bit of butterscotch, then something that I never even would have imagined, which would add to the chewy effect, and that was water. But all of these ingredients had to be measured out specifically, and he was the only one who knew how to do this. And he could take these cat turds, bag these up, and sell these for 2 soups a piece. Donnie had an exclusive prison candy recipe that nobody else had. And he was pretty lucrative with this. In terms of prison candy as a hustle, you're not gonna make a lot of money with it unless you've got some exclusive. And these cat turds, oh, they were that. They were exclusive. I was more interested in the recipe to this candy than I was with anything else, than the picture I was supposed to be in here painting, than my prison picture operation that I had that was super lucrative. I really wanted this recipe. And Donnie made it pretty apparent that he wasn't willing to part with this recipe. It would take a lot of, well, money, and also a lot of convincing on my part for Donnie to be willing to part with this recipe and give it to me. And one way that I went about convincing him was, Donnie, look, you are on the 4, 5, 6 side of the prison, and I'm on the 1, 2, 3 side. You've got the entire side of this prison with the candy. You can't even get to the other side. Let me do something on the other side. And it was that logic, along with a couple of pictures that I gave to Donnie, along with me purchasing for him an entire run of this candy, which would be a jar of peanut butter, a couple of bags of candy. He would give me this recipe. And when I took this back to my side of the yard, and I had Coffee Man, who was sleeping right beside me during this time, put this together after I told him how to do it, Coffee Man was my manufacturer. And people started seeing these little rolled up doo-doo balls. They weren't doo-doo balls, they were cat turds. And began to be nosy. Hey, what y'all making over here? Y'all making some peanut brittle? No, that ain't what this is. Nah. Hey, try this. We had these little testers, these little individual, like one small cat turd ball. Hey, try this. Boy, that's some crack. Hey, that is some candy crack. What is that? Cat turds? Y'all making what? How much for a couple of those? Donnie put me up on game with the cat turd recipe. And that was only one of the things that I remember about Donnie from this very last time. The other thing was, with as much time as I would spend inside of his housing unit doing this painting, You know, he would also talk about all of the changes that had taken place in his life at this time, and one of the biggest changes was he now had 2 kids. And he spoke about those kids all the time. They were his absolute world. And he talked about how much he wanted to go home and do the right thing for those kids. And, you know, that was really powerful and motivating to hear. And in fact, I knew a lot of people while locked up who talked the same about their kids being their number one motivating factor for them to get out and attempt to do the right thing. And the sad thing about it is, though, is even with something so powerful and so inspiring as a reason to want to get out and do the right thing, some people still wouldn't be able to get it right. And unfortunately, I don't know if that is exactly the case with this guy, Donnie, that I've introduced you guys to. I won't speculate, nor is it even important at all. But the reason why I wanted to introduce all of you to this guy was because yesterday I was on Facebook and saw so many posts that made it apparent to me that Donnie just passed away. And the sad thing about this is I see this far too often for any number of reasons. People who I was locked up with who go home, and then the next thing you see are a bunch of posts on Facebook, RIP this person, RIP that. It is super sad. But I wanted to take this time to honor this guy, who I considered a really solid dude while locked up, who I considered a friend while locked up, and you know, deserves to have something done in his memory. And this is the small gesture that I can do in an effort to introduce all of you to this guy, and also to try to let this guy's story serve a more powerful point. And I think that powerful point should be, I don't want this to be cliche saying, you know, life is too short, but you know, that is true. Life is a gift that so many of us take for granted. I took it for granted for so long. And whether you take it for granted or whether it's just snatched away from you, you gotta do as I say at the end of every video. Attempt to make the most of every day, because every day is absolutely a gift. No matter where you are in your own personal life, no matter what struggles that you deal with right now, what struggles you have dealt with, what struggles you still continue to try to get beyond, know that you have today as an opportunity to work toward trying to do something better, trying to do something more positive, trying to get one foot in front of the other in an attempt to gain some distance between whatever it has been in your own personal life holding you back. I dedicate this to Donnie and also little Ronnie. And I hope by me sharing this with y'all, you're in some way more grateful for today. Hey, look, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did so, please leave a like and a comment letting me know exactly what you thought about it. As always, until next time, enjoy life, the free world. Never take a moment for granted, and make the most of every day. Peace!